The invisible guest Olivia Reed adjusted her plain black uniform in the staff bathroom of the Westmore Gallery. 28. Her hands already told stories, her face didn't. Small burns and calluses from years of crafting pastries since dawn at Francine's bakery, followed by evening catering shifts to keep her grandfather's medical bills paid. Tonight was the Autumn Arts benefit, where paintings worth more than her lifetime earnings would change hands over champagne she wasn't allowed to drink. "Remember, we're essentially invisible," said Tomas, the catering manager, as the staff lined up for final inspection. No engaging with guests unless directly addressed. "Mr. Blackwood specifically requested understated service tonight." Olivia nodded, though she'd never seen Julian Blackwood in person. Everyone in Westridge knew of the Blackwood family, old money that had somehow managed to stay both relevant and respected. Unlike other wealthy families, they were known for philanthropy rather than scandals. The gallery transformed as darkness fell, lighting designed to make both art and guests look their most flattering. Olivia moved between clusters of people, offering delicate hors d'oeuvres that she'd helped prepare but could never afford to eat at a restaurant. "Darling, who did the pastry work?" "These are divine," a woman in a shimmering emerald dress asked, not quite looking at Olivia. "Francine's bakery, ma'am," Olivia answered softly. Oh, the woman's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. "That little place downtown? How quaint. I suppose they're adequate for an event of this scale." Her companion, draped in diamonds that caught the light with every movement, laughed softly. "Charlotte always finds these charming little establishments. Remember that gallery opening where they served those awful canapes? At least these are edible." Olivia's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral as she continued through the room. This wasn't the first time she'd been talked about as if she weren't standing right there, near the gallery's eastern wing. A small group of younger socialites blocked her path. One woman with a sleek blonde bob and a glass of champagne that had been refilled too many times looked Olivia up and down. "Excuse me," Olivia murmured, trying to navigate around them. "Wait," the woman said, reaching out to touch Olivia's sleeve. "Your uniform, ... It's not quite right, is it? The others have that little Westmore pin, but yours is missing." Olivia's hand instinctively went to her collar. The pin had fallen off earlier, and she hadn't been able to find it. "I apologize. It probably couldn't afford the deposit for it," another woman whispered, just loud enough to be heard. Laughter rippled through the group as Olivia stood frozen, tray in hand. In her peripheral vision, she noticed a tall man in a charcoal suit, observing from several feet away, his expression unreadable. "Ladies, I believe the Harriman collection is being unveiled in 5 minutes," came a calm, deep voice. The man had approached without Olivia noticing. "You wouldn't want to miss it." The group dispersed with murmured apologies. Not to Olivia, but to the man who she now realized was Julian Blackwood himself. Up close, he wasn't what she expected. No flashy watch or signet ring, just intelligent eyes and an understated presence that somehow commanded more attention than any of the louder personalities in the room. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." She kept her eyes down. He seemed about to say something else when his assistant appeared at his elbow with urgent news about a bidder. And he was pulled away. Olivia continued her rounds. Now, hyper-aware of her missing pin and wondering if she'd be docked, pay for the violation. What she didn't know was that Julian had been watching her all evening, not because of her appearance or the missing pin, but because he recognized her work immediately. The pastries hadn't come from Francine's. They were Olivia's own creations. He knew because he'd been quietly commissioning her work for private events for months, through intermediaries who never mentioned his name. And as the evening continued, with Olivia moving like a shadow through a room that barely acknowledged her existence, Julian Blackwood was forming a plan that would soon turn this entire world upside down. Whispers and shadows. 3 months before the Autumn Arts benefit, Olivia had received an unusual request at Francine's bakery. Personal assistant to an unnamed client wanted to commission specialty desserts for a private dinner. The pay was exceptional, the only condition being absolute discretion. "They specifically requested you, Ms. Reed," the assistant had said over the phone. "Your lemon lavender petit fours at the Henderson wedding caught their attention. Those petit fours had been Olivia's own creation, not part of Francine's standard menu. She'd made them on a whim, never expecting anyone to notice them among the elaborate wedding cake and chocolate fountains. Over the weeks that followed, more orders came. Each time the brief was challenging, but the compensation generous enough that Olivia could cut back on catering shifts and spend more evenings with her grandfather, whose Parkinson's was worsening. She never knew the client's identity until the night a black car arrived at the bakery's back entrance after closing. "Mr. Blackwood would like to thank you personally," the driver said. Olivia found herself ushered to a quiet restaurant where Julian Blackwood sat alone at a corner table. He stood when she approached, a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and genuine. "The mystery patron," she said, finding unexpected courage. He smiled, the same subtle expression she'd later see at the gallery. "Guilty, though, I assure you. The mystery was not meant to be theatrical. I simply wanted your work judged on its merits, not influenced by ... Double quotes, he gestured vaguely. Expectations. That first conversation lasted hours. Julian spoke of growing, upweighted by the Blackwood name, of his passion for supporting artists who created from authentic places rather than market trends. Olivia found herself sharing stories of her grandfather teaching her to bake, of dreams deferred by practical needs, the business plan for her own patisserie that she kept updated despite having no capital to launch it. Their worlds had no reason to intersect, yet they did, first weekly, then more often. Julian would appear at the bakery just before closing, or Olivia would find herself in places she'd never been. Quiet jazz clubs, private galleries after hours, the greenhouse atop his downtown building where he grew rare herbs she incorporated into her recipes. Why keep this quiet? Her friend Donnie had asked when Olivia finally confided in someone. If I were dating Julian Blackwood, the whole world would know. But both Olivia and Julian had their reasons. For him, relationships had always become public spectacles. Potential partners more interested in the Blackwood fortune than the man himself. For Olivia, fierce independence was a core value. She refused to be seen as climbing social ladders or seeking financial rescue. The night before the Autumn Arts benefit, Julian had called her. "I've just learned you're on the catering staff tomorrow," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Olivia, you didn't have to take that job." "I made a commitment to Tomas weeks ago," she replied. "It's mixing dough for morning buns while cradling the phone against her shoulder, and I need the hours this month. Grandpa's new medication isn't fully covered. Let me help with that, please." "You know my answer, Julian?" Her tone was gentle but firm. "I'm not accepting your money for personal expenses. It's not what this is. This isn't charity. This is me caring about someone who works too hard. And I care about someone who doesn't." "Need to rescue me," she countered. "I'll be fine tomorrow. It's just another gig." But standing in the Westmore Gallery, feeling the sting of the socialite's comments, Olivia questioned her stubbornness. Pride wouldn't pay her grandfather's medical bills. Yet something deeper than pride kept her from accepting Julian's help. A need to enter his world on her own. Terms or not at all. What Olivia didn't know as she navigated the gallery with her tray of appetizers was that Julian had already set something in motion that would change everything, something that had nothing to do with rescuing her, and everything to do with recognizing her true worth. Glass walls, the grand reopening of the Blackwood Foundation's modern wing was the event of the season. Located in the historic Blackwood Museum downtown, the wing had undergone a 2-year renovation to showcase emerging artists alongside established masters. Julian's passion project, and many whispered, his attempt to step out from his father's formidable shadow. This time, Olivia wasn't serving canapes. She stood in the kitchen supervising the final assembly of her dessert installation. A progressive tasting experience where each piece represented a different artistic movement featured in the wing. "They're ready for you, Miss Reed," an assistant said. Appearing at the kitchen door, Olivia smoothed her dress, a deep burgundy number borrowed from Donnie, more elegant than anything she owned, but still simple compared to what awaited her outside. Julian had insisted she attend as a featured culinary artist, not staff. She'd agreed only after ensuring her contribution would be treated as a legitimate commission. not a favor. The museum's grand hall took her breath away. Restored Art Deco details gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, the space filled with Westridge's elite and formal attire. Julian stood near the center, engaged in conversation with an older couple, looking impeccable in his tuxedo, when he caught sight of Olivia. His expression softened momentarily before returning to professional composure. They had agreed. Tonight they would maintain appropriate distance. This was Julian's most important professional achievement. The focus should remain on the art and the Foundation's mission. Their relationship still private, but only distract from that purpose. Olivia moved through the crowd, accepting compliments on her dessert presentation from those who had no idea she had also made their morning pastries at Francine's. She was heading toward the Impressionist section when a cool voice stopped her. Well, this explains the sudden interest in culinary arts on the program. Victoria Harlow, Julian's childhood friend and the Foundation's legal counsel, stood blocking Olivia's path. Tall, impeccably styled, and sharply intelligent. Victoria had never bothered to hide her suspicion of Olivia during their few previous encounters. Olivia acknowledged with a polite nod. The installation seems to be well received. Julian has always had a soft spot for community projects. Victoria sipped her champagne, though including a bakery worker in the same venue as a Rothko is certainly pushing boundaries, even for him. Nearby conversations quieted as people tuned into the exchange. Olivia felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced at the gallery months ago. I believe art takes many forms, Olivia replied evenly. Foundation seems to value diversity of expression. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Gade. Though some expressions belong in museums, while others are more suited to street fairs, perhaps. We all have our proper place in the ecosystem. What a fascinating ecosystem it is, came a new voice, Lise Blackwood, Julian's mother. Joined them with the grace of someone who had navigated social landmines for decades. Victoria, dear, I believe the Carmichaels were looking for you regarding the Singapore expansion. Victoria hesitated, then nodded stiffly and moved away. Lise turned to Olivia with an appraising look that revealed nothing of her thoughts. So you're the baker who's been occupying my son's calendar these past months, she said quietly. Olivia straightened. Mrs. Blackwood, please. It's Elise. She waved a hand adorned with an emerald that could have paid off Olivia's grandfather's medical bills for years. Julian hasn't brought anyone to family dinner in nearly 3 years, yet he speaks of you often. I was beginning to think you were imaginary. Before Olivia could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Julian's father, Richard Blackwood, had arrived earlier than expected and with several board members. In tow, Julian immediately moved to greet them, his posture subtly changing to match his father's authoritative presence. Ah, the patriarch arrives, Elise murmured. Tell me, Ms. Reed, do you find our world as absurd as it sometimes appears to me after 40 years within it? The unexpected question caught Olivia off guard. I find all worlds have their absurdities, she answered carefully, and their beauties. Elise's expression warmed slightly. Well said. She nodded toward Julian, now leading his father's group, toward the main exhibition. He was always different, even as a child. Seeing value where others saw only utility. It's why this foundation matters to him, why you matter to him, I suspect. Across the room, Victoria had rejoined Julian's group. Oh, she spoke animatedly. Gesturing toward where Olivia stood with Elise, Richard Blackwood's gaze shifted to them, his expression inscrutable. I should check on my installation, Olivia said, suddenly uncomfortable. Of course, Elise replied. But Ms. Reed? Yes. The glass walls of this world appear solid until someone has the courage to tap on them. Then everyone discovers how easily they crack. As Olivia retreated toward the kitchen, she heard Victoria's voice carrying across the hall, serving girl from the gallery benefit. Julian's latest charity project, clearly, though inviting her here tonight, shows remarkably poor judgment. Julian's response was lost as the kitchen doors swung closed behind Olivia. She leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. She didn't belong here, not as a curiosity, not as a Julian's project, not as an outsider to be tolerated. Perhaps their worlds were simply too different to bridge. What she didn't see was Julian's expression as Victoria continued her commentary, or the quiet conversation between Richard and Elise Blackwood as they watched their son. She didn't see Julian excuse himself from the group, his decision already made. The Gallery of Truth. The evening progressed with speeches and champagne toasts. Olivia remained professional, explaining her dessert concept to interested patrons while avoiding Victoria's cutting glances. Julian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, though she noticed he seemed distracted. Checking his watch repeatedly, at precisely 9 o'clock, Julian tapped his glass for attention. The crowd quieted as he took position at the front of the grand hall. "Thank you all for celebrating this milestone with us," he began. "The modern wing represents our commitment to recognizing that art exists beyond traditional boundaries. Tonight, I'm honored to announce a new initiative for the Blackwood Foundation, one that expands our definition of artistic excellence even further." Murmurs rippled through the audience. This hadn't been on the program. Richard Blackwood frowned slightly, while Elise watched with subtle anticipation. "Please join me in the East Gallery for the unveiling," Julian continued, gesturing toward doors that had remained closed all evening. Curiosity drew the crowd forward. Olivia hung back, unsure if she should follow until Donnie appeared at her side, having arrived late from her hospital shift. "Come on," Donnie whispered, pulling her along.
Whatever this is, you don't want to miss it.
The East Gallery had been transformed. Where Olivia expected paintings, she found photographs, dozens of them, professionally mounted and lit. As guests filtered in, gasps and whispers filled the air. Olivia froze in the doorway, recognition washing over her, each photograph documented. Her work, not just the commissioned pieces for Julian's events, but creations from throughout her career. Her graduation showpiece from culinary school. The wedding cake she'd made for her cousin using flowers from her grandmother's garden. The bread sculpture she'd created for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Each image was accompanied by a small plaque detailing the inspiration, technique, and significance of the piece. In the center of the gallery stood a glass case containing a single object, her worn, stained recipe journal, open to a page filled with her handwriting and small sketches for a dessert she'd once described to Julian as her dream creation. One requiring ingredients and equipment she couldn't afford. Julian stood beside this centerpiece, watching Olivia's reaction as she slowly moved through the space, touching nothing but seeing everything. "What is this?" Victoria demanded, breaking the hushed atmosphere. "This," Julian replied calmly, "is the launch of our culinary arts initiative. The Blackwood Foundation is expanding to recognize culinary creation as a legitimate art form worthy of the same support we give painters and sculptors." He turned to address the crowd, but his eyes remained on Olivia. "For generations, my family has prided itself on recognizing brilliance that others overlooked. Yet we've been blind to entire categories of artistic expression. This exhibition features the work of our inaugural fellow, Olivia Reed, whose talent and vision exemplify exactly what this foundation should be celebrating." Richard Blackwood stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This is ... unexpected, Julian." "The best art often is," Father Julian replied. "As is the truth about value, Ms. Reed's work belongs here as surely as any Picasso. And I've established an endowment to ensure others like her receive the recognition and support they deserve." He moved toward Olivia, who stood transfixed before a photograph of the first dessert she'd ever made for him. "This isn't about charity or rescue," he said quietly, though in the hushed gallery his words carried. "This is about justice. It's about seeing clearly what has always been extraordinary." Victoria pushed forward. "Julian, this is clearly a personal indulgence." "The board hasn't approved, actually," Elise interjected smoothly. "The family trust requires only 2 Blackwood signatures for initiatives under 50 million. Richard and I signed the paperwork this morning." She smiled at her husband. "Didn't we, dear?" Richard Blackwood adjusted his glasses, studying the photographs with newfound interest. "Indeed, though I was unaware of the ... top personal connection." He turned to Olivia with appraising eyes. "Young woman, is your work truly your own, or has my son exaggerated your talents?" Before Olivia could respond, Donnie stepped forward. "Sir, I've watched Olivia create magic out of flour and sugar since we were 19. Everything here? It's actually an understatement of what she can do. A small smile crossed Richard's face. Then perhaps my son's judgment is better than I credited. He nodded toward Julian. Proceed with your announcement. Julian returned to the center of the gallery. The Culinary Arts Initiative includes a fellowship program and a permanent installation space. But its first project is this, he gestured. To an architectural rendering newly unveiled on the far wall, a sleek, modern building adjacent to the museum. Foundations, he announced. A culinary innovation space where fellows can create without financial constraints. The public can experience food as art. Its first resident chef will be Olivia Reed, assuming she accepts the position. The gallery erupted in conversation. Victoria stormed out. Several critics huddled in discussion. And in the midst of it all, Olivia finally found her voice. You did all this without telling me? She asked Julian when she could finally reach him. If I had told you, would you have accepted? He countered gently. No. I would have seen it as charity. Exactly. But it isn't. It's recognition. He took her hand, no longer concerned about who might see. You once told me you couldn't enter my world on anything but your own terms. I'm not asking you to enter my world anymore, Olivia. I'm asking if I can help build one where we both belong. Reframe it 6 months after the modern wing opening, Foundations welcomed its first visitors. The building, with its clean lines and walls of glass, stood as a physical manifestation of boundaries crossed and redefined. Inside, culinary artists, from diverse backgrounds created alongside one another, their work evaluated not by pedigree, but by passion and execution. Olivia's kitchen, state-of-the-art space she still sometimes couldn't believe was hers to direct, occupied the heart of the building. Today, she supervised final preparations for an important private event, a dinner celebrating her grandfather's successful completion of an experimental treatment program. It's fully funded by the Blackwood Foundation's new medical research initiative. The Nakamura technique you showed me keeps breaking down on the third layer, called Zoe. One of the culinary students in the apprenticeship program Olivia had insisted be part of Foundation's mission. Coming, Olivia replied, adjusting the temperature on a custom oven before moving to assist. From the mezzanine above, Julian watched with quiet satisfaction. The past months had brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. Victoria had resigned from the Foundation, only to launch a competing culinary program that immediately floundered due to her fundamental misunderstanding of what made food transcend mere sustenance. Richard Blackwood, initially skeptical, had become an unexpected champion after tasting Olivia's black walnut soufflé, declaring it superior to anything he'd eaten in Paris. Most surprising had been the reaction from Westridge's elite. Some, like Charlotte from the gallery benefit, had attempted to claim early discovery of Olivia's talent. Others maintained distance, uncomfortable with boundaries dissolved. But many had genuinely embraced the expanded definition of artistry, including Elise Blackwood, who now hosted a monthly salon featuring collaborations between traditional and culinary artists. Contemplating your success, came a voice beside Julian. Donnie, now the healthcare coordinator for the Foundation's community programs, joined him at the railing. Contemplating change, he replied, and its unexpected paths below them, Olivia moved with confidence through the space she had helped design, her authority evident in every gesture. Gone was the woman who had stood silent beneath criticism. In her place was a chef who had testified before the city council about food deserts, who had launched a scholarship for culinary students from disadvantaged backgrounds, who had proven that value existed wherever talent and determination met opportunity. She's still working too hard, Donnie observed. Some things never change. Julian smiled. Some things shouldn't. He checked his watch. Is everything set for tonight? All arranged. Her grandfather arrived early and is resting in the private dining room. The others will be here at 7. Donnie gave him a sidelong glance. Nervous? Oddly no? He touched the small box in his pocket. Not an ostentatious diamond, but a simple band engraved with the date they'd first met, when he'd recognized something extraordinary in her lemon lavender petit fours. When something is right, you know? It. Later that evening, as Olivia's grandfather raised a toast to his granddaughter's achievement, Julian took in the gathered company. The Blackwoods, seated comfortably alongside Olivia's friends from the bakery. Culinary students engaged in animated conversation with museum curators. Francine herself is proudly watching her former employee now leading a movement. Not a fairy tale ending where wealth magically solved all problems. It's not a simple story of rescue or transformation. Instead, something more complex and truthful, too. People who had created a space between worlds, where both could exist authentically. When Julian finally knelt before Olivia that night, it wasn't a public spectacle or a dramatic statement. It happened in the greenhouse atop his building, surrounded by the herbs she used in her creations, with a question as simple and profound as their journey had been unexpected. And her answer, like everything she created, was both completely original and absolutely perfect.